Hey everybody, I'm here today to give my honest take on Captain America Brave New World, starring Anthony Mackie, Harrison Ford, and Tim Blake Nelson, and a bunch of other people. It's been a long and winding road leading to the release of this film, with all the news of the reshoots that have been so public, the delay of the film because of how people at the studio felt, that the rough cut wasn't exactly up to expectation, so the filmmakers decided to reshoot it and rework the film to the point where it became more satisfactory in their minds anyway. And, of course, with how people felt about the MCU's track record post-Endgame, which admittedly has not exactly been up to par, there was going to be some negative disposition towards this film no matter what the quality was. With all the noise that has been buzzing around this, I made it an effort to go in with as much measured expectations as I could, but also playing by its terms, trying to enjoy it for what it was. And I can tell you for a fact, it is nowhere near the disaster that people are making it out to be. At least some people anyway. That being said, there's plenty of issues to go around with this one. So any of you who've been following my series of reviews leading up to this film, unfortunately I wasn't able to get my revisiting Captain America Civil War out before I saw this. Last weekend I had a really bad cold, to the point where I was almost bedridden for several days. I mean, I was able to go out and go to work or anything, but after a while, at the end of the day, my body just demanded that I go to bed. And after a while, I just didn't have the energy to do it. So just a quick announcement before we get to the review. I am going to be posting my Civil War video pretty soon, within the next couple of days. As for revisiting Falcon and Winter Soldier, I'm going to be watching that over the next couple months in anticipation for Thunderbolts, since we have John Walker and Bucky Barnes in that movie. Figure in that respect, we'll be revamping it in anticipation for that film anyway. And if you couldn't tell by the way I talk, I'm doing better, but still not 100% fully recovered yet. Also, I had a lot of energy over this past Sunday with my team, the Eagles, getting their second Super Bowl title, so you can imagine the chaos in my body that was going on when that game was happening. Yes, I even got a AJ Brown jersey with the logo on it. You got to score in the game, so I thought it was appropriate. Anyway, sorry, just had to acknowledge that. Two-time Super Bowl champs, go Birds. And I'm going to talk about some details regarding the plot. Not everything, but I don't really feel like I'm going to do the movie justice if I don't at least discuss some of the details that happen here. So with Captain America Brave New World, it was basically in a really bad position with all the reshoots that were announced and the lackluster response that some people had towards Falcon and Winter Soldier. A lot of people feel that Anthony Mackie isn't up to par to carry on the Captain America mantle. I mean, not to get too deep into it, but there's a huge disdain that has been thrown at the MCU as of late. Even towards Spider-Man No Way Home, where people say it's actually a really bad movie and that it falls apart at the seams. That's a discussion for another day. I don't have the energy to go into that right now, but it's kind of made me less tolerant and less willing to listen to most people when it comes to thoughts on the MCU post-Endgame. Now I've just decided to listen to a select group of people that I can trust to give me at least a very balanced and objective look at said MCU project. Secretly, I was really hoping for this movie to prove a lot of those bastards incorrect. But after the rotten reviews that have come out for certain projects in the MCU as of late, I'm not really fazed by the rotten score that it has currently at this time on Rotten Tomatoes, because the audience score is actually really positive. I think last time I checked, it's 79%. And critics and audience's views are different, but that's a different discussion, and it's a deeper issue of what the connection is between the two. With all the stuff that has come out, it's clear that there was some type of trouble with the script to begin with. There was all of this stuff that was happening. It kept changing in post-production. If the reaction from the end of a test screening is something along the lines of, yikes, this isn't good, you gotta fix this, then you know there's a problem. This film was brought to us by Julius Onah, who was known for directing the Cloverfield Paradox film, and some other things that I've never heard of. And along with other people, he's credited as one of the screenwriters. The plot is mostly easy to understand. There's a deeper conspiracy that's happening, where an assassination attempt is made on President Ross, who we know is General Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross, who was the antagonist, so to speak, of Bruce Banner the Hulk. This film really takes a few ideas from 1970s espionage spy thriller type of films, and even some from the early 90s, like with Harrison Ford's Clear and Present Danger or Patriot Games, where he played Jack Ryan. This film really carries some of the stuff that we saw in Falcon and Winter Soldier. Carl Lumbly, who plays Isaiah Bradley in the show, makes an appearance in here, and due to certain mind control efforts that are being used by the leader, he's brainwashed into attempting to assassinate the president during a summit that he has at the White House. And it's up to Sam Wilson to uncover the plot and prove his innocence to the world. I would say, as far as the plot goes, while it is fairly predictable after a certain point, I found myself somewhat invested in what was happening. Even if the way the leader's role in here was not exactly that amazing. I guess to go right into it, Tim Blake Nelson returns as Samuel Stearns, the leader, after so many years of wondering if this character was ever going to come back in the MCU. And he's really there just to show a bunch of exposition scenes, and while I understand the reasons for it, I think the emotional heft that would be required for that was very lacking. I think he could have benefited at least one moment or one small scene where we saw an emotional side to him outside of his hubris to experiment with gamma radiation. And we all remember him from the Incredible Hulk film where he wants to create some type of gamma radiated army. But if he showed something else outside of that, maybe the film could have benefited from that by having the audience get on board with him, or at least understanding his motivations. And due to the droplets that were dropped on his head when the abomination was created, his head or his brain grew a bunch of sizes, and now he has the ability to think in probabilities and calculate what people are going to do based on their past actions. He basically became a think tank for President Ross. He was locked up for many years due to experimentation, similar to Isaiah Bradley when he was experimented on by the government for 30 years. And out of revenge, he was secretly planting gamma radiation into Ross's pills when he was suffering from a heart condition. And they established that Samuel Stern has the ability to use this song in order to cause people to go into a certain mindset to carry out the orders that he wants them to, which is an intriguing idea, but I don't really think they go enough into that. And I realize there's a lot of stuff that they have to juggle in here, but along with the other plots that are thrown around in here, it feels like it doesn't have enough time to properly be fleshed out. And that's really the film's biggest problem. It's overstuffed, and it feels like everybody's just spinning too many plates in their hands instead of just having it all weave together. In fact, if I were to compare this side by side with Falcon and Winter Soldier, this feels like a big finale to that show, but in a feature film setting with a much better budget. Similar to how I look at films like Rise of Skywalker or Deathly Hallows Part 2. With all the legwork that had been established in the previous outings, this is one giant race to the finish line. The film does have its emotional moments, like with Sam reuniting with Bucky for a little bit at the hospital when his one friend Joaquin is wounded in combat. And there's also Ross revealing that he had a heart condition and that he was dying when he shares with Sam what was happening with him, and his desire to reconnect with his daughter Betty. I think those moments are well done when they happen, but I wanted more of that, or at least have it drawn out long enough to where we can actually soak it in. And it's really no surprise coming from me, but Harrison Ford as President Ross, he is the perfect fit for this character, and I actually wish that it was him the entire time in the MCU. Like with other actors that have shown up in the MCU in the past, from Samuel L. Jackson to Robert Redford, he adds a huge amount of gravitas to the entire picture and to the MCU as a whole. And the fact that he has done it all at this point by playing the Red Hulk, I mean, let's face it, this guy's not getting any younger. I mean, it wasn't too long ago that he showed up once again as Han Solo and Indiana Jones. And even his character from Blade Runner. If he feels like he can do it, we're all here for it, buddy. As for Anthony Mackie as Sam Wilson, I think he's very capable of carrying a solo Captain America film. Even with all the film's problems, he has enough of a charm and charisma to him that manages to hold the film together. I will say this, though. The emotional focus of Sam Wilson, I think, was done better in the Falcon and Winter Soldier series. I mean, it's an unfair advantage given that it's a mini-series in comparison to a feature film, but the advantage there is that that series gave us enough time to understand Sam Wilson's predicament and how he wasn't sure initially if he wanted to take up the mantle of Captain America. Some of that stuff is reiterated here in his brief interaction with Bucky at the hospital. I mean, we all have moments as human beings where we start to think, are we really meant to do what we're supposed to do? And once in a while, we do need a reminder, which I really like how that does play into Bucky visiting Sam at the hospital. And I'm really glad that they got Sebastian Stan to come back, because if he didn't show up in this film at least once, I feel like the movie would have been missing something. And I love the interactions between those two, maybe even more so than Cap and Tony whenever they butt heads with each other. But yeah, I do like the emotional moments that Sam Wilson gets, but along with other stuff, the film needed to be drawn out a lot more in order for us to soak it all in. I mean, Isaiah Bradley's good to have around, but he doesn't really get to do a whole lot. I mean, just sitting around in a prison cell for most of the film when he's framed for attempting to assassinate the president. Giancarlo Esposito, who plays a mercenary for hire for the leader, is a fun addition to have in the MCU, and he is always great at playing the bad guy. Gustavo Fring in Breaking Bad, Moff Gideon in The Mandalorian. There's really nothing that this guy can't do at this point. I believe he was added in during the reshoots, or his role was somewhat extended because of that. I don't know exactly. If anyone can tell me in the comments, just let me know. Another thing that this film does that I'm really happy to see happen in an MCU film again is the interconnectivity that it has to other projects. The biggest one is this celestial island that's sticking out of the Indian Ocean. We all know that from the Eternals film, and I'm really happy that they're finally addressing it. And now that it's sticking out of the water, everybody across the world wants to see what it has to offer and the materials that it's showcasing inside. And it's a big setup for the X-Men, since it has adamantium. We all know what adamantium is used for. Wolverine's claws. And at one point, it's even a backdrop for a conflict that almost breaks out between the United States and Japan. As for the action sequences, they're mostly serviceable or competent. I've heard a lot of people complain about the fight scenes in the opening act, where it just didn't look good, it felt very lackluster. Me personally, I thought they were fine, nothing groundbreaking or anything, but I think if you had at least some type of competent director, that might have fared better for some other people. I'm not trying to blame the director, but I don't know if he was exactly the kind of guy that was up for the job, but I think they could have had somewhat of a better person behind the camera, or at least someone who was qualified for the job, if you know what I mean. Maybe like Anton Fuqua. I mean, that guy is very versatile, and he has shown his capabilities as a filmmaker, so I wouldn't have been opposed to him making something like this. The best bits of action for me are when they're fighting over the Celestial Island. Sam and Joaquin are trying to stop the rogue pilots from targeting the Japanese fleet that's going around the island. Very similar to Top Gun Maverick. Not just with the call signs of the pilots, but the way they're very mobile in their movements. For me, it took me right back to watching that for the first time. That being said, the CGI is pretty noticeable in a lot of those shots. I mean, I don't really get upset over CGI because I think that's irrelevant to complain about, but this is Marvel Studios, and if you have enough of a reputation for creating high quality visual effects, you better damn well use it, because some of it looked pretty artificial. The Hulk effects I thought looked pretty good, but some of the stuff that happens here in the second act, not so much. Not terrible, but it definitely needed a lot more polishing. Oh, and the pacing I found to be very quick. Just like Rise of Skywalker or even Spider-Man 3, where it breezes through a lot of moments that we need to focus on. The first act, I would say, starts out fairly strong, but then once the assassination plot kicks in and the Celestial Island battle happens, it feels like a huge race to the finish line. And after the island battle, I started to say, whoa. Are we really getting closer to the finale? This film is about 1 hour and 58 minutes. I've said this quite often with other movies. If they tacked on at least another 15, maybe 20 to 30 minutes, that I think would have been a much needed remedy for allowing certain things to breathe in here. But then we get to the finale where the leader is able to manipulate or adapt his plan to turning Ross into the Red Hulk in front of the whole world when he has a press conference. This was a pretty big selling point in the trailers, and I understand why Marvel used him in the trailers quite often, because they wanted to get people's interest. And as of now, with the box office returns domestically anyway, it does look like it's somewhat paying off in their favor. As I said, the Hulk effects look pretty good, and I think the Hulk does look a lot like Harrison Ford. To my knowledge though, I think the Red Hulk is able to talk while he's in Hulk form. He's able to retain his intelligence enough to where he can actually talk to people, just like Professor Hulk does in Avengers Endgame, and Sam Wilson goes up against the Red Hulk to subdue him, leading to what I thought was a fairly enthralling fight, because Sam Wilson doesn't use super soldier serum. He has to use his technology, he has to use his wit and his intellect in order to outsmart him. I have to mention, I'm really happy that Sam Wilson didn't use the super soldier formula, because Steve gave him the shield for a reason. He saw that he was a good man, and you don't need to take the super soldier serum to prove yourself. But I do like how they take it to the famous Cherry Blossom Gardens area of Washington, D.C., which they established that's where he used to take his daughter Betty on walks together. I was kind of waiting for Betty Ross to show up in here at that one sequence, but she shows up when he's taken to the raft, so I thought that was kind of a missed opportunity there, but I've been kind of holding off on bringing this up. There's been some reviews that have pointed out a similarity between President Ross turning into a monster as a fantasy trip for Donald Trump. I know, I probably shouldn't mention this, but I wasn't the only one to bring this up. Eric Voss from New Rockstars made this comparison. There's probably a bunch of other people too as we were going into this. It's hard to not notice the similarities here because Trump has said that he wants to rule like a dictator. So, President Ross turning into a red-skinned rage monster, there's bound to be some comparisons between those two. I'm not saying that was the intention of the movie. Given the current political landscape right now, you can't not notice that stuff. And I think it's somewhat of a stretch to assume that it's a jab at our current president right now, but it's bound to piss off at least some people out there. And you know what I say? So what? Let him. I'm sorry I brought that up, but I felt like I had to say something. So Ross is able to calm down, he puts himself in the raft, resigning from his presidency, and he gets a reunion with his daughter, which is a really nice moment, although, again, like with other stuff, needed more attention. And then we get a post-credit scene where we have Sam Wilson talking with the leader who brings up the idea of worlds are starting to collide, which is a pretty big tease for what's to come in Avengers Doomsday. And maybe even what's going to happen in Fantastic Four later this year. Though it feels pretty standard and tacked on, not exactly something to go, oh my god, that's coming. It's just like any other post-credit scene, really. It's a crucial one, yes, but it doesn't really have as much energy as I would like to say. Captain America Brave New World is not an awful movie by any stretch, but I wanted more from this one. It's a perfectly harmless take it or leave it entry, and I can watch it and have a good time if I wanted. People in the theater that I saw it in, they seem to have a good time with it, and a lot of people seem to be enjoying it too, at least the general audience anyway. But if you're looking for just simple popcorn fun, this is the movie for you. If you're craving a good character study mixed in with political espionage stuff, you're probably going to be disappointed. For me, I was able to enjoy it for what it was, but it definitely needed a major improvement. And just a mini rant for you guys, I have to admit, I'm getting a little frustrated with Marvel right now because this has been almost 6 years since we've had an Avengers film. Everybody talking about how there's no structure to this universe since Endgame. It's becoming a lot more noticeable. Now, obviously, we are building towards Avengers Doomsday, which is coming out next year. If anything, with Thunderbolts and Fantastic Four, it might be that step back in the right direction to bring us some sort of consistency. And I was kind of starting to see that here. But the fact that we haven't had an Avengers film since 2019, that is not good. It would have helped to have some kind of a mini team-up movie of some kind to bridge that gap between Endgame and Doomsday. I mean, if any of the guys at Marvel are listening to this, I know that you guys are capable of doing something good again. We've seen it even post-Endgame with some projects sticking the landing on my end. Even with Spider-Man No Way Home. I don't give a damn what anybody says. But guys, seriously, you gotta do better than this. I'm really hoping and praying that Thunderbolts is really the energy shift that it needs. We gotta get something going, guys. We can only hope. That's really all I gotta say about Captain America 4. Thank you guys so much for watching. Comment below and tell me what your thoughts are on this movie if you've seen it. And as always, see you in the next one.